They said John Deere was untouchable. They were wrong. In factory towns across the Midwest, something unthinkable is happening. Layoff, closure. The iconic green machines that once defined American strength are being boxed up and shipped out south of the border. And farmers, they're walking away, not just from a brand, but from a belief system built over generations. Why is one of the most trusted names in U.S. history losing everything? Who made the decision to move America's farming heart offshore? And what's left when the last John Deere plant shuts down? This isn't nostalgia. This is economic warfare, and you're going to feel the fallout. What's happening? Once upon a time, owning a John Deere tractor meant freedom. It meant that a farmer could work the land with confidence, fix his machine in the barn, and pass it down to his son. But in the past decade, that freedom has eroded, replaced by restriction, litigation, and digital lockdown. And now, the very machines farmers trusted have turned against them. Imagine buying a pickup truck, but needing a licensed dealer's permission just to change the oil. That's what John Deere has done to farmers. Their modern tractors are no longer just machines. They're software-locked computers on wheels. And unless you have Deere's proprietary codes, you can't fix even a basic engine fault. The outcry wasn't immediate, but once it started, it grew into a rebellion. Farmers from Nebraska to Ohio began speaking out, launching the Right to Repair movement with a message that was both simple and defiant. Let us fix what we paid for. The anger boiled over into state legislatures. Lawsuits were filed, bills were drafted, and in some cases, states passed laws requiring John Deere to loosen its iron grip on repair access. But for many farmers, it was too little, too late. Decades of loyalty were destroyed overnight. At farm shows and dealer meetings, older farmers openly questioned whether they would ever buy green again. Brands like Kubota, AGCO, and Case Y8 started gaining ground, not because they were necessarily better, but because they respected the independence of the American farmer. John Deere had become a digital landlord, one that still held the keys long after the sale was made. And in doing so, they betrayed the very spirit of farming itself, the idea that a man could buy a tool, fix it with his own hands, and keep his operation running. Gone. In its place was a closed ecosystem built on profit, not partnership. And as frustration festered, the economic storm was already gathering on the horizon. But while farmers fought for control, a larger crisis loomed. The markets were collapsing. When the fields go silent, tractors aren't moving. Not because the technology failed, but because farmers can't afford to start them. Across the United States, the agricultural economy is in free fall, and the numbers are terrifying. Since the year 2022, the price of corn has fallen by 37%. Soybeans have dropped by 24%. Wheat is down by more than 35%. These aren't minor fluctuations. They're economic sinkholes. For farmers, those falling prices mean less profit. And when margins are thin to begin with, it doesn't take much to throw an entire operation into chaos. Farmers who once bought new equipment every 5 years are now pushing machines well past their limits. Tractors from the early 2000s are being held together with duct tape and hope. Auction lots are flooded with rusted-out machines that should have been retired years ago, but nobody's buying. Deere's own dealerships are feeling it too. Showrooms are empty, not because of supply issues, but because no one's placing orders. Salesmen are staring at silent phones. Mechanics are watching service bays sit idle. The demand didn't just slow, it crashed. And this isn't just about farmers tightening their belts, it's about the complete collapse of financial confidence. High interest rates have made borrowing nearly impossible. Fertilizer and diesel costs are through the roof. And with no clear export recovery in sight, many growers are simply choosing not to plant certain crops at all. Why grow when it costs more to harvest than to leave the field fallow? For John Deere, the consequences are brutal. When farmers stop buying, the entire supply chain collapses. Manufacturing slows, layoffs return, and investor confidence erodes. But at the root of it all is a hard truth. It's not that farmers don't want new equipment, it's that they simply can't afford it. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, John Deere made a move that turned outrage into fury. Because the next announcement wasn't about layoffs or repair restrictions. It was about leaving the country. We dug through over 200 pages of filings, trade data, and testimony to bring you this story. So if this helped you understand what's really happening, consider subscribing. The Mexico meltdown. In a decision that sent shockwaves across the country, John Deere announced it would shift significant manufacturing operations from the United States to Mexico. The justification? Cost optimization. The impact, catastrophic. Factory jobs, some of them held for 30 years, were packed up and shipped south to Monterey. Deere executives claimed it was a strategic move: lower labor costs, proximity to global supply routes, and increased flexibility. But for American workers, it felt like betrayal in its rawest form. The optics were devastating. A company built on American soil, praised for its commitment to rural communities, was now outsourcing jobs just months after issuing mass layoffs. Workers in Waterloo and Ankeny saw the writing on the wall. This wasn't just a shift in strategy, it was an exit plan. And while the spreadsheets might have made sense in boardrooms, they made no sense to the people who had spent their lives assembling those tractors. The same hands that built the brand were being told they were too expensive to keep. Worse still, Deere tried to soften the blow. They promised to maintain high-value manufacturing in the U.S. and reinvest in innovation. But to the men and women in shuttered plants, that promise felt hollow. Jobs weren't coming back, wages weren't being replaced, and the message was clear: profits now came before patriotism. This wasn't just about economics, it was about identity. What happens when an American icon no longer makes its products in America? What happens when loyalty is met with outsourcing? And the person who took it most personally, the man already on the campaign trail. Because Donald Trump wasn't just angry, he was ready for war. And John Deere had just made itself a target. Trump versus John Deere. It didn't take long. The moment John Deere announced its decision to shift manufacturing operations to Mexico, President Donald Trump came out swinging. But this wasn't a quiet press release or a diplomatic reprimand. It was a full-scale political assault. At a fiery campaign rally in rural South Carolina, Trump took the stage, pointed straight at the cameras, and delivered a thunderous message. If John Deere wanted to abandon American workers, they would pay the price, literally. With a pounding fist and roaring crowd behind him, Trump declared that any John Deere product manufactured outside the United States would face a punitive 200% tariff upon re-entry. Not 10%, not 20, 200%. The crowd erupted. For Trump, this wasn't just an economic move, it was a cultural line in the sand. If you take our jobs across the border, he shouted, you're not selling those tractors back to us like nothing happened. This wasn't policy, it was performance. But it resonated. Across working-class communities, Trump's message landed like a sledgehammer. For families who had watched factories shut down and rural towns hollow out, it felt like someone was finally punching back. It didn't matter if the tariff would hold up in court or even work economically. What mattered was that someone powerful was publicly shaming a company that had long enjoyed an untouchable status in American agriculture. John Deere, for its part, scrambled to control the damage. In statements released through press wires and earnings calls, the company defended its decision as strategic globalization, claiming the move would optimize resource allocation while maintaining domestic core operations. But no amount of corporate jargon could compete with Trump's plain-spoken fury. For Trump's base, John Deere had crossed a moral line. And in a nation already deeply divided over what it means to be American, Trump wasn't letting anyone forget it. The real impact of his words wouldn't be felt in applause. It would be felt in the market. While Trump raged from the podium, a foreign competitor had already begun rewriting the rules. And the next chapter wasn't coming from the Midwest. It was coming from Beijing. China breaks the bargain. American farmers were sold a promise, one that said China's rapidly growing population and shrinking arable land would make it the ultimate customer for U.S. agriculture. Politicians, economists, and global trade advisors all echoed the same prediction. China would buy American grain, American soybeans, American corn, and even American meat for generations to come. The narrative was simple, seductive, and optimistic. In the year 2012, that optimism hit its peak when China briefly became the largest buyer of American soybeans. Farmers across the Midwest began planting with one eye on the Pacific, believing they were feeding the future. But what came next was a betrayal, one not forged in a trade war or by tariffs alone, but by China's strategic shift toward food independence. Rather than rely on unpredictable imports and volatile trade relationships, China doubled down on self-reliance. Through government subsidies, land reforms, technological upgrades, and infrastructure investment, China began building a domestic agricultural engine that didn't just reduce demand for American crops. It undermined the very foundation of U.S. farming export logic. Chinese soybean production increased by nearly 60% over the last 10 years. The country invested in genetically modified seeds tailored to its climate, built massive water diversion systems to irrigate previously unproductive land, and poured billions into state-owned farms to ensure consistent yields. As a result, American farmers suddenly found themselves with excess supply and nowhere to send it. Between 2022 and 2024, American corn prices fell by 37%, soybeans dropped by 24%, wheat by 35%, and beneath those numbers lies a deeper pain. Silos sitting full, prices below break-even, and loans that can no longer be repaid. China didn't stop buying because of a trade spat. It stopped buying because it no longer needed what America was selling. What had once been framed as a temporary tariff battle under President Trump in his first term revealed itself as something far more permanent, a reordering of the global food trade. The myth that China would be the eternal buyer of American crops is gone, and with it, a central pillar of U.S. farming economics. But China didn't just stop buying, they started building. And what they built next wasn't just about crops, machines that harvest them. The red tractor revolution. John Deere was once synonymous with global agricultural excellence. Its green and yellow machines graced fields in more than 100 countries, standing as a symbol of American engineering, reliability, and innovation. But over the past 5 years, that global dominance has quietly eroded, replaced by a growing wave of Chinese-made machinery that is cheaper, more accessible, and increasingly good enough. Companies like YTO Group and Zoomlion, once considered inferior knockoffs in the farming world, have matured into formidable players. Backed by aggressive state support, they've scaled up production, reduced costs, and refined their designs. Today, in regions across Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of Latin America, these red and gray machines are displacing John Deere equipment, not through superior engineering, but through affordability. A Zoomlion tractor can cost up to 40% less than its American counterpart. For small and mid-sized farmers in developing economies, that price difference is not just a bargain, it is a lifeline. In nations where access to capital is limited and farming margins are razor-thin, the choice is clear. Price beats prestige. Utility beats legacy. John Deere, with its vertically integrated supply chain, premium pricing, and strong American brand identity, has found itself boxed out of markets it once ruled. While Deere continues to develop cutting-edge precision equipment, it's losing relevance in the global middle, where most of the world's farmers operate. And that middle is where growth happens. The consequences are not just financial. They're symbolic. America once exported more than food and machines. It exported the idea of itself. Strong, innovative, industrial. But in this new landscape, the face of farming innovation is no longer painted green. It is painted red. And while Deere fights to defend its top-tier customers with autonomous tractors and AI-driven sprayers, an entire generation of global farmers is learning to operate Chinese machinery and finding that it works just fine. Deere's answer to this wasn't just to cut prices. It was to look to the future, to bet everything on automation. Even if the technology was cheap, even if the global markets were fair, there's still one more piece missing from the farming equation. Because even the most advanced tractor can't harvest a field if there's no one left to walk it. Fields without hands. In the fields of California, Florida, and Texas, the crops don't harvest themselves. For decades, American agriculture has depended on immigrant labor, particularly undocumented labor, to plant, maintain, and collect the harvests that feed the country. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, over 70% of all farm workers are immigrants. Many of them live in the shadows, with few protections, performing grueling labor for minimal pay. But under President Donald Trump's new wave of immigration crackdowns, that labor force is evaporating. Raids, deportations, and stricter visa policies have already begun to reduce the number of available workers across the agricultural sector. And the consequences are immediate. In 2018, during Trump's first term, farmers in California and Arizona reported entire fields of produce left to rot due to labor shortages. Now, with renewed enforcement, that crisis is returning. Only this time, the stakes are higher. With crop prices already falling and margins razor thin, missing even one harvest can destroy a farm's annual revenue. This labor shortage doesn't just hurt farms, It drives up the cost of food. When fewer workers are available to pick lettuce, strawberries, or apples, supply drops. Prices at the grocery store climb. And with inflation still affecting working-class households, that rise becomes a political flashpoint. The irony? Even as automation promises to replace labor, that future is not yet widespread. Most farms still rely on human hands. And without those hands, the entire system begins to collapse. And without it, John Deere's machines, no matter how advanced, sit idle. But even if Deere solves the technology gap, and even if farmers manage to hire enough workers, there's still one force they can't stop, one that doesn't care about trade deals, corporate decisions, or even presidential orders. Because what's coming next isn't political, it's environmental. Even if you have the machines, and even if you find the workers, one unstoppable threat still looms: climate. And this time, it's not just the future of farming that's at risk, it's its very existence. The vanishing farmer. It did not happen all at once. There was no great collapse. No single moment when the American family farm officially died. It was slower than that, quieter. One auction here, one foreclosure there. A generation passed without sons or daughters returning to the fields. And before anyone realized it, over 50% of small family farms had disappeared from the United States in less than 40 years. This wasn't just an economic shift, it was a cultural loss, a generational fracture. Small farms weren't just businesses, they were birthrights, handed down through sweat and sacrifice, plowed, planted, and harvested by people whose names were carved into the land as much as the soil itself. And now that land was changing hands, not to neighbors or family, but to massive agricultural conglomerates. For the remaining family farmers, survival has become a daily act of rebellion. They face impossible odds, while corporate farms receive bulk rate deals on equipment, fertilizers, and transportation. Small operators scrape by with personal loans, rising costs, and no safety net. Their yields are lower, their labor costs higher, and their access to political influence practically non-existent. Federal subsidies have only deepened the divide. Despite public rhetoric about preserving the American farm, most government assistance disproportionately flows to massive agribusinesses with legal departments, accountants, and lobbyists. Small farmers, often operating alone or with limited staff, struggle to even access the systems built to support them. It's not neglect. It's institutionalized exclusion. Walk into any Midwestern county and you'll find the same story. Third-generation farmers selling their land not out of greed, because it's the only way to pay off decades of debt. Machinery auctions no longer feel temporary. They feel like eulogies. And with every acre sold, a piece of rural identity disappears forever. But what makes this trend so devastating isn't just the economic loss, it's the emotional rupture. Farming, for many, was never just a job. It was a philosophy, a way of life rooted in independence, persistence, and care. Losing that means losing a core part of America's cultural DNA. And if you think the crisis ends with ownership, think again. Because what's making farming even harder isn't just finance, it's the planet itself. But even for those farmers who managed to hold on to their land, the next fight wasn't with Washington or Wall Street, it was with the sky above. Climate versus crops. Droughts used to come once a decade. Now they come every other year. Floods that once struck randomly now arrive in patterns. Fires that once seemed unthinkable in farmlands now tear through California, Texas, and the Pacific Northwest with terrifying regularity. In the past 5 years alone, American agriculture has faced more climate disruption than in the previous 3 decades combined. In the Midwest, historic droughts have left millions of acres barren, forcing farmers to abandon entire seasons. In the South, torrential rains have drowned crops during critical planting windows. And in the West, fire season is no longer a season. It's a year-round threat, but weather is just the beginning. Warmer temperatures have created ideal conditions for pests and plant diseases that once thrived only in tropical zones. Now they're reaching as far north as Michigan and Pennsylvania. Corn rootworm, soybean rust, armyworms. The list grows longer every year, and so do the costs of fighting them. Farmers now spend more on crop protection than ever before. But even with new chemicals, advanced forecasting, and insurance, many still lose the fight. A single missed window, a single unpredictable frost, and an entire year's profit can vanish overnight. John Deere has responded with a suite of high-tech solutions: autonomous sprayers, predictive soil sensors, electric irrigation systems. But here's the brutal truth: most small and medium-sized farmers can't afford them. These climate-friendly tools come with premium price tags. For many, they might as well be science fiction. And even if they could afford the hardware, climate instability is pushing insurance premiums so high that many growers can't risk planting high-value crops at all. Instead, they fall back on low-margin commodities, knowing full well they're digging deeper into survival mode. The emotional toll is crushing. These are not one-time disasters. This is the new normal, and it's turning agriculture from a life's calling into a perpetual gamble. Even in the face of economic collapse and environmental chaos, some still believe there's a way forward, but it will require a total transformation. Farming's last lifeline. Despite the devastation, all is not lost. The American agricultural sector is not dead. It's endangered, and like any endangered system, it can be saved with the right interventions, bold leadership, and a willingness to break from outdated models. It starts with access. Farmers need more than subsidies. They need liquidity. Low-interest government loans, rapid access credit lines, and seed funding for new crops could change the trajectory of thousands of small farms overnight. Some states have already piloted these programs with remarkable success, but they remain isolated pockets in a fractured national system. Next comes trade. America's once dominant export markets are drying up, but not irreversibly. With the right diplomatic strategies and bilateral trade deals, the U.S. can reestablish agricultural partnerships that prioritize quality, sustainability, and fair pricing. But that means treating farming like a strategic industry, not an afterthought. Policy must shift too. New bipartisan legislation is being drafted to support regenerative agriculture, local food systems, and precision farming. If passed, these programs could level the playing field for farmers currently overwhelmed by corporate giants. Then there's technology. John Deere still holds the keys to some of the most advanced ag tech in the world. Self-driving tractors, electric combines, AI-powered crop monitoring. If they choose to make these tools accessible, not just to the mega farms, but to the family operations, they could redefine their legacy. From corporate villain to comeback hero. But that choice lies with leadership, and time is running out. This isn't about going backward. It's about evolving forward, faster, smarter, and with more equity. Farming doesn't need to be rescued with nostalgia. It needs to be redesigned for resilience. But as the dust settles, the most important question still remains. Who's going to feed America in the next decade? Who feeds America now? This isn't a story about tractors. It's a story about trust, survival, and the future of the most basic thing any nation needs. It's food. For 2 centuries, American farmers powered the world. They supplied grain to distant continents, fed entire armies, and became the silent backbone of a booming superpower. But now that backbone is cracking. John Deere's role in that story is complicated. It once represented the best of American engineering, reliability, grit, innovation. But today, it stands at a crossroads. It can choose to help rebuild or continue to retreat behind profit margins and quarterly reports. Because the truth is clear, if the next generation of farmers cannot afford to work the land, they won't. If they can't repair their equipment, they'll walk. If they can't compete with foreign prices and survive climate disaster, the fields will go empty. And when that happens, when small farms go silent, corporations take over. Not just in name, but in function. Fewer hands on the soil, more algorithms in the boardroom. That's not just a business shift, it's a cultural extinction. But there's another path, one where new farmers rise, powered by technology but grounded in community. One where the children of immigrants, veterans, and climate-conscious entrepreneurs reclaim agriculture not just as a livelihood, but as a mission. The future of farming is still unwritten, and it doesn't belong to boardrooms in Chicago or Beijing. It belongs to all of us, to the workers, the growers, the people who still believe in rebuilding from the ground up. So what do you think comes next? Is John Deere too far gone? Or can the soul of American farming still be saved? Let us know in the comments. And if this story opened your eyes, share it with someone who still believes the land matters.